Are Aston Villa the real deal? Now, to answer that question, we need to go on a little bit of a journey. We're going to go on a journey to answer the question of are Aston Villa the real deal? And we're going to go right into it right now. So, 1 year ago, around this time, I created a video and it was all about 5 things that Unai Emery must do to improve Aston Villa. Now, at this moment in time, Aston Villa were on its knees. We were near the relegation zone. We were playing turgid football. We'd got no identity. We'd got no style. We'd got a fan base that had been united with promotion to the Premier League. We'd survived. We'd grown as a fan base on a journey with a manager that had got us out of the Championship. We'd survived in the Premier League. We'd been through some tough times trying to survive in the Premier League. We'd had COVID. We'd come back. We were trying to establish ourselves. But we were fundamentally still trying to find Aston Villa. We were still trying to search and become the Aston Villa Football Club, the giant that we all know that this football club is, the giant that any football pundit will always come to Villa Park and say that this is a big club. We've got former players that talk about the club being at this grand stature, but it was a club that was still searching for an identity and a culture, a philosophy to bring winning ways back to Aston Villa, and for Villa fans to be able to puff their chest out and say, I am an Aston Villa fan and I am proud to be an Aston Villa fan. And me as a fan, I highlighted 5 key points that we needed to do for Aston Villa to become successful. And in the short space of a year, those 5 things that just a football fan looked at and analysed and saw that needed to happen for Aston Villa to be back where they belong have happened. I stated that we needed to unite as a fan base together to grow, to create an atmosphere, a buzz, a vibe, a intimidating atmosphere at Villa Park, an atmosphere where we stick together and we believe in the process, we trust the process, something that when it gets difficult, we stick together. And that atmosphere needed to happen. We were disjointed on the pitch and we were disjointed off the pitch. We also needed to coach. We needed somebody that could come in and coach the current players to give them belief, to make them better. And that for me was the biggest fundamental thing that we needed to happen. We needed to be coached and the current players needed to improve. It's so difficult for clubs just to have a new manager and that manager comes in and rips up and destroys the current players that you've already got, because my view at the time was Aston Villa still had a lot of good players that were massively underperforming. My next point was we needed to recruit. We needed to recruit well. We needed to recruit well around what we'd already got. The players needed to create a mentality, a winning mentality, a mentality of that they can stick together and that they can improve and they can believe that they can achieve things with this manager. And the final part was the club needed to create a culture. It needed to create a winning culture. It needed to create a culture of style of play. It needed to create a culture for the under-21s, the under-23s, the under-18s, that they can build and grow. And the club needed to become a football giant. And all of those things with the culture had to happen. We've then brought in Monchi, who is going to be creating the footballing philosophy with the recruitment. And then that ties in with what Unai Emery needs. So those 5 points that I highlighted a year ago are all to do with the direction on the way in which Aston Villa are currently going in. But to do that, we've also now got to go back to talk about what we saw when Unai Emery first came in in his first season. And when we start to see how we started to play last year, tactically, how we're going to evolve this year, we will then start to see a pattern emerge of tactical coaching, a belief, a mentality, a culture, and then we're going to start to see how success starts to grow and seep into the team. So let's go back to last year. But what we've got to do is we've got to move some of these players out of the way and bring in some of the players that we saw that were a success to Aston Villa last season. So some of these players currently don't play for Aston Villa. So what can we see here then? So this was how Aston Villa were lining up last season under Unai Emery. Take out Pau Torres. He wasn't there either. So this is Aston Villa last season. What were they trying to do? Unai Emery came in and created a philosophy, a style, a way of playing. And what he wanted to do was precisely this. We played with a subtle asymmetric formation. So Moreno offered the width down that left-hand side. The back three shifted across. And we played with Ashley Young as a right back who tucked him. His role was to not go down there. His role was to convey and hold this space through here. Unai Emery employed a double pivot of Boubacar Kamara and Douglas Luiz. We know a double pivot are two players that cannot play on the same line. So they have to play on a diagonal line. If it was to look like that, they cannot play on a straight line. What that enabled us to do is we played with Boubacar Kamara actively defending this zone here. He was the one player in this midfield who was the enforcer. He was the player that was to retrieve the ball. He was the player that was to break up play. And then Aston Villa were then away. We played John McGinn and Jacob Ramsey in a box midfield. You can see that the box midfield looked like this. So the box midfield was offering two in front of the double pivot. They would offer central togetherness. There would also be electric in the 4-2-2-2. So Unai employed the box midfield, which was sitting in that area through there. So, but what also happened with Unai Emery last season was the introduction of Leon Bailey. Bailey's role was to offer width on the right-hand side, but also offer a presence supporting Ollie Watkins. So the aim was to offer, get into the byline through there with Moreno, and it was Ramsey's runs that were getting to the byline and Ramsey's runs that were playing in there. John McGinn was playing in this area here, and John McGinn was really being a bulldozer in the sense of he was more of a midfield player that would try and get Villa further up the pitch. But with this in mind, with this sort of how Young would actively operate through here, we've got Moreno offering the width. We've got Luiz that was sort of playing in that area there, but wasn't really getting too far forward. And then we've got Kamara playing in that area there. Aston Villa's style of play was build up. We were trying to play out from the back. We were trying to entice teams to come on to us, and we was really hitting a lot of teams on the break. It was that explosive counter-attacking football, but it was also the tactical nous of this team to be able to defend and to be able to defend resolutely. And what we did see a lot of last season under Unai Emery was this back six. The back six would look somewhat like this. And then what we'd got is a two in front, or we play a three in front. And then we'd got Watkins up top. And it was that defensive, grinding out results, winning games by the odd goal that was starting to create the mentality of we are here to win football matches. And I think that was the start of the Unai Emery philosophy. We climbed the table miraculously. We were a joy to watch last season, and it was absolutely fantastic. And a lot of Villa fans felt like we'd got our club back. We in that short space of time, we had grown and we were starting to get there. Recruitment was very, very important. Recruitment was important for the way that we wanted to play, the way that the vision of Emery. And again, at this point, we weren't the finished article. Now, Aston Villa have been hit by massive injuries this season. We've had injuries to Tyrone Mings. We've had injuries to Emery Buendia. Now, Buendia was also playing in these areas as well. So he was a massive player last season. And then we've also had injuries to Moreno, and we've also had injuries to Ramsey, and Ashley Young left. So the core players that played for Aston Villa last season, you could put Bailey in there as well, look somewhat like this. So there's been a shift in the way that we play. There's had to be, because we've got so many injuries, but the recruitment has also enhanced Aston Villa as well. So some of the players that played last season, like Moreno, Ramsey, Mings, Buendia, Young aren't there anymore. So there's been a shift, and in come Moussa Diaby, Yuri Tielemans, Pau Torres. We've got Matty Cash has been there as well. And then we've got Luca Dean. So you can see, yes, Luca Dean played for Aston Villa last year and he played minutes with Moreno. Cash played last season, but he was sort of in and out of the side as well. So this is the new look Aston Villa. This is how Aston Villa, in the space of a transfer window, have been able to evolve and have been able to evolve into a footballing juggernaut that want to play football. Now, what's happened this season is the team has evolved and the team has grown and the stature of us has grown and the belief in the way we do things has gone on tenfold. So like last season, we've got Luca Dean bombing on and going forward and offering width. But what we've also got from last season is, instead of the right back going on and staying in there, both go forward. What that's enabled us to do is to push players further forward and allow us more width, more dominance, more territorial dominance, more structure, and a better shape and a better way for Aston Villa to do things. So if we break down the way in which Aston Villa want to play, we play out from the back with Pau Torres. Pau Torres has enabled Aston Villa now to engage and look for those balls. It's enabled us to go with the balls into Douglas Luiz, and it's enabled us to go with balls into Yuri Tielemans. In turn, it quickly gets Aston Villa up the football pitch, and it enables us to move the ball quickly, and that highlights the role of recruitment of Pau Torres. Now, the next person who I want to talk about is the way in which Moussa Diaby has enabled Aston Villa to get up the football pitch quicker as well. His pace, his directness has enabled Villa to penetrate opposition back lines with the pace of Ollie Watkins and Moussa Diaby. He has been electric. He's getting into great areas. He's getting into areas inside the penalty area. A lot of his finishing is coming from around there when he's sort of in this area, and he's actively peeling off the back line of defenders and he's occupying space in and around the penalty area. He too has been a revolution for Aston Villa. But what we are also seeing is we're seeing the role of now Boubacar Kamara, who is in this area. It's allowing Matty Cash to go forward. It's allowing Luca Dean to go forward. But it's also allowing Douglas Luiz to have the freedom of the football pitch. He's the conductor for Aston Villa. He's the one player who is orchestrating the good things and everything that Aston Villa do. But not only when Kamara goes and sits in this screening role, it means that John McGinn can actively take up areas in the double pivot as well. And we're also now starting to see the best out of Yuri Tielemans, who's making these runs into these areas as well. But all of this comes with the fact that Aston Villa have been able to do this without two key players that we saw last season. Aston Villa are going to be bringing back Jacob Ramsey, and we're also going to be bringing back Moreno in the next couple of weeks as well, which is going to be absolutely massive for Aston Villa. And it's also going to enable us to have certain options for different games as well. And it feels like the cavalry is going to be arriving for Aston Villa with the introduction of Jacob Ramsey coming in there and with Moreno coming in there as well. So these are all going to be different options that Aston Villa have got. And what we've seen is this shape and shift in the way that we play. And I think it's been absolutely fantastic. We can see this from the graphics in the way that we played. So I want to take you back to an away game last season against Southampton. And this will highlight and showcase what I was talking about with the way in which we played last season compared to this season. So this was an away game from last season. So we've got Moreno, number 15. We've got 18, Ashley Young. And we've got 4 and 5, Mings and Conte. We've got 44, Kamara, who's sort of playing in that double pivot with Luiz. And then you've got the 2 in front, number 10, Buendia, number 41, Ramsey, 31, Bailey, and number 11, Ollie Watkins. And this was an away game from last season. And you can see the shape of this team. There's more defensive nous, shall we say. And if we take a look at an away game from this season, Burnley away, you can see a real different shift. You can see 14, Pau Torres, 3, Diego Carlos, 4, Consa. You've got 44, Kamara, and number 6, Douglas Luiz. 2, Cash, actively playing as a winger. Luke Dean going forward. Number 7, McGinn. And number 19, Diaby, and 11, Watkins. This, for me, is the ideal average positions for an Aston Villa away performance this season with the shape that we've seen. Now, this enabled us to have defensive shape in 4 Consa, 3 Carlos, and 14 Pau Torres. But then it allowed Kamara and Luiz to actively be the double pivot. We've got width out wide with the 2 fullbacks. And then we've got midfielders and we've got a focal point up top. This is how Aston Villa have evolved from last season in a short space of time. These 2 graphics enable me to show you the defensive shape and the attacking shape of the evolution of Aston Villa in the space of a year. Not even a year, probably around 6 months. But the graphic that I'm going to show you now shows the areas in which Aston Villa need to improve to become the real deal, but also get top 4 this season. This graphic to me highlights perfectly the area in which Aston Villa have to improve on. Number 1, home graphic, 18 points out of a possible 18 this season. And it's absolutely remarkable. It's absolutely sublime. The numbers are fantastic. The way that we play is fantastic. And you just can't fault it because it's showcasing the way we want to play. It's showcasing to me this formation in a nutshell. This is Aston Villa at home. This is how we will play. This is what we will do. We have territorial advantage. We go forward. We have all of the ball. We are adaptable. We can adapt. And teams are scared of Aston Villa at Villa Park. But what we can also do is we can change the system within substitutions. And this highlights the adaptability of an Unai Emery team. Now, if we take a look at this graphic now, we can see Kamara, who's actively screening, and we can see where Cash is, and we can see where Moreno or Luke Dean would want to be if you've got Ramsey or Tielemans in there. And you can see that maybe if we want to have a little bit more width, Maybe we want to bring in someone who's more creative and has got more flair. How can we do that can change the Villa team? How can we do this within a substitution to make us more attacking? You'd look at this and think, well, you're quite attacking because you've got two wingers, you've got creative players, you've got Kamara in there that's screening, you've got Douglas Luiz that's got freedom, McGinn can help out in that double pivot. But one substitution can help Aston Villa massively. And it is this substitution that is at this moment in time that is an absolute game changer for Aston Villa. We take off a player in midfield. So in this instance, we'll take off Jacob Ramsey, Tielemans or a Zaniolo. Gone. But what we'll do is we will shift the way that we want to do things. So we will move John McGinn over to the opposite side where that player's just came from. And we will move Kamara back into central midfield. We will then ask Matty Cash to be more defensive. We will say to Cash, sit in there, go forward a little bit. Kamara then will come in there and screen if he needs to. There will be that tactical nous with the players now. They will know what they are meant to be doing. But then we'll bring in the introduction of Leon Bailey, who can set the game alight from this area. He can get to the byline. He can try and drive into those areas. He can then have link-up play with Moussa Diaby. Those two can rotate and move around as well. And that one substitution at this moment in time is becoming an absolute game changer for Aston Villa. But now we've got to talk about an area for improvement and an area that I think going into the next run of fixtures has massively got to improve. So if we go now to the same graphic and take a look at the away form, Aston Villa currently sit 13th in the Premier League on away form with 7 points. You'd look at Liverpool and think we're only 2 points behind them. But if Aston Villa can rise to around 5th, 6th or 7th place, Champions League football is on, in my opinion. How are we going to do that? I think we have to go back and just sometimes subtly, now that's not being defensive, it's being tactical, astute, and just looking at where we got a lot of our joy last season away from home. And this is the perfect average position for me on how we managed to do that. Remember, this is Southampton away. We won the game 2-1. So we've seen that away from home, we can look like this. And this is our style at the minute. This is how we want to look. But I think sometimes it's okay to look a little bit more like this. And I think it's just growing into away games and just making sure that we are still in the game. The problem that Villa face away from home, in my opinion, at the minute, is we want to be expansive. Yeah. So if we go back to the tactical pad, if we go back, this is basically this is home form. This is home form. This is what we want to do away from home, and we want to push Cash on. We want to push the fullback on. We want Kamara to sit in there. But for me, it leaves us somewhat a little bit vulnerable in this area here. This is where, for me, it leaves us a little bit vulnerable away from home. And I just feel like, yeah, if we get the early goal away from home, it sits into our game plan perfectly, because we go 1-0 up, you have to come on to us. What you'll see is when Aston Villa go 1-0 up, we are happy for Pau Torres to stay there with the ball trapped under his foot, waiting for an opposition player to come on to him. Opposition players have to come on, because if you're away from home and you're away at Spurs and we are 1-0 up and we've got a player that's got his foot on the ball, the away crowd don't like it. They think you're time wasting. They get agitated. They start shouting. So Villa 1-0 up away from home is an absolute tactical game plan from Aston Villa. We want to be in that position. And when teams start coming at us, one pass into Dougie Luiz, a pass into John McGinn, we've turned over the ball, we've turned over play, pass into there, and we are completely away. We've got 3 or 4 passes and we're creating chances. We've got balls going into there. We've got balls coming into the box. We've got runners going into there. We've got Luiz going there as well. So perfectly, Villa 1-0 up. But what's happening at the minute, if you look at Liverpool, Newcastle, Forest, when Villa go 1-0 down away from home early, we can't invite teams onto us because they've got the lead. So we are then having to play our expansive football away from home, and we're getting caught, in these areas, we're getting caught in these areas, and we're getting caught in those areas. And we've seen it time and time again. Players like Neto, players like Elanga are causing damage to us away from home when we are actively pressing and going for the win. So I just think a more composed, a growth into a game, whether we just go for it from the start and not let teams have that build-up possession, or do we just sort of be more composed, more resolute, and sometimes just have to go, you know what, at times, if they're coming on to us in the first couple of minutes, if we've got to just sit a little bit more like that and just ride out a spell. It's not being defensive. It's just being tactically aware of where we are and what we are trying to do and grow into a game. And I think that's how Aston Villa can become the real deal. But for us to become the real deal, we have got to navigate through a big spell. This is Aston Villa's biggest test coming for us this season. It is December. It is every football team in the Premier League's big test. Not only Aston Villa's, everybody's. Everybody is in the same boat. They have all got the same amount of fixtures, barring the couple of European games that we've got. December is where it gets tough. You get injuries. But for Villa, our injuries are coming back. We've got Moreno Ramsey coming back in this period that are going to help us massively. So advantage number one for Aston Villa going into this period. The next busy period to look at is a big game coming up next week with Tottenham Hotspur. Big test for Aston Villa. Big test for Aston Villa away from home. We've got Legia Warsaw. Hopefully then we can get out of the group. Job done. And then we've got a difficult away game at Bournemouth. They look revitalised. And then 2 tough games. And I am looking at these 2 games with an eagle eye, because for me, good teams have a moment. Good teams have a moment in a season where they look at, and that gives them the belief, that gives that team the belief to achieve what they're about to achieve. And for me, Aston Villa beat one of those teams, either Man City or Arsenal, and that is the catalyst for Aston Villa to go into that month full of confidence and to be finishing December in a very, very big position. And that is why everything that I've said, that journey that we have been on, we are building and we are growing into this top team. We might not be the finished article right now, but you can see progress and progression of what Aston Villa are and what we have become in just over a year. And this excites me so much because we're only on the cusp of Monchi. We're only on the cusp of Unai Emery. And we're growing into a fantastic footballing team and we're only going to get better. But one player who is absolutely massive for me and massive for where we are is Douglas Luiz. Now, one man, Fabrizio Romano, is trying to sell this player to Arsenal. He's trying to get rid of Douglas Luiz at Aston Villa. And for me, again, I just think it's just media speculation. I think Douglas Luiz under Unai Emery is an absolute monster of a player. He is the player that Unai Emery has looked at to build his Aston Villa team all around Douglas Luiz, and he's just an absolutely massive player for Aston Villa. For Douglas Luiz to leave Aston Villa, it would take over £100 million. It would be that figure. Douglas Luiz currently is one of the best central midfielders in the Premier League. If we take a look at his strengths, passing, long balls, through balls, key passes, direct free kicks, and taking set pieces. If we take a look at his individual stats per 90, we've got 84% possession accuracy, 5.30 progressive passes per 90, 1.73 progressive carries per 90, 2.24 tackles per 90, 1.07 blocks per 90, shot creating actions 3.28. He is an absolute monster of a player for Aston Villa under Unai Emery. And if we also take a look at his heat map this season in the Premier League, we can see that it is heavily congested in and around the D of the halfway line. But you can see in the fight in his own half, it's heavily red, but also in that opposition half, it is red as well. And he's now added progressive runs to his game as well, which is something that has been able to improve his game. Also, if we take a look at his SOFA score rating so far this season, 7.49, absolutely massive. He's got 5 goals so far this season. He's Aston Villa's penalty taker. Goal conversion, 25%. But then I just want to take a look at this stat down here, which has caught my eye. And it's this one. Ball recoveries per game, 6. That's absolutely massive for a central midfielder in this Aston Villa side. And you try taking Douglas Luiz off Unai Emery, because we've built this team around him and he's just absolutely massive. You know, if you take a look at this graphic that I've got to show you here as well, and this highlights Aston Villa's passing network. So you can see the passing network against Fulham. You know, how crucial Douglas Luiz is to Aston Villa. He is the conductor. He is the orchestrator in the middle of the park for Aston Villa. You can see he's got a network with Konsa, Torres, Luka Dean, Tielemans, Kamara. We've also got a network with Cash. We've got one with Tielemans as well. So, you know, his network to Aston Villa is just absolutely crucial. And I am absolutely going to lap off the interest from Arsenal in January, because he's absolutely going nowhere. He's crucial to Aston Villa. He's an integral part of the team. We've built the team around Douglas Luiz. And my final point would be that we've tried to keep players in the past. We've tried to entice them to stay, but we have also tried to entice them to stay with sort of fantasy thoughts of, we want to get this team back to where we are. We want to do this. We want to do that. But that was on absolutely no vision, and there was nothing to back that up. Now we have the fact of, you can clearly see we're a European team. You can clearly see that we are competing for the Champions League. You can clearly see what the vision is at Aston Villa. So if someone says, can Aston Villa get Champions League? It's not a fantasy thought, because we are in that place at the moment. We are in the area of trying to get into there. My other point that I would like to make finally on that point would be, if I have to just briefly look at the Premier League table and look at the club that are trying to get, if we try and look here, we try and look at the club that are trying to get Douglas Luiz, who are sitting 2 points above Aston Villa. Come January, Aston Villa could be above that club. So the club that wants him, the club that wanted him last season, when he wasn't even in the team, that couldn't get him then, you know, the gap that we've been able to close shows the job that we are doing. So for me, are Aston Villa the real deal? We are quickly becoming the real deal. The real deal would be Champions League football for me. And I would like to say that I don't want us to be the real deal right now. I don't want this to be the best it gets. I want the best it gets in a year or 2 years' time when we are competing at the top end table. So for me, we are quickly and fastly becoming the real deal. Do I want us to be that now? No, because it would probably mean that that's the pinnacle of what it gets to. The real deal for me is when we're in that Champions League. And this season, we can get there, in my opinion. So I kind of wanted to build this up to be a bit of a preview of what's to come and just talk about where we are and where that journey's been and how we're evolving and how we can improve. And for me, it's definitely on that away form. So, Villa fans, hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. I've enjoyed this jacket. Absolute beauty of a jacket, isn't it? Absolutely beauty of a jacket. The claret and the blue just looks unreal. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. Thank you. We will have our match preview out next for Spurs. It's big. It's going to be a big one. Up the Villa.